Monday. Good day to you and welcome to Mansfield today. As usual on a Monday, we take a look at things relating to business, courtesy of our friends at Capital Legacy, your number one provider of wills and estate administration. So here we go. With a big drum roll, ladies and gentlemen. No prize for getting what's on the agenda today. It's got to do with everything to do with the new variant and also our government's handling of it, and also this absolute slew of traffic bans that's been imposed against South Africa. Chris, let's bring ourselves up to date with what's happening here.
Jeremy, yes, a very good morning to you, and I really like that drum roll. You could repeat that next week if you wouldn't mind as well. Of course, it's not just us suffering bans, but it's also our neighbours in Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Eswatini, Namibia, and for some countries also the likes of Mozambique, Angola, and other parts of southern Africa. What good such travel bans do remains to be seen. The new variant, which has been given the Greek letter Omicron, has already spread to the UK, Belgium, Germany, Italy, Israel, and the Czech Republic. Denmark has 2 suspected cases. Hong Kong has 1. Yes, they may well all have had connections to Southern Africa, but as US COVID boss Dr. Anthony Fauci said over the weekend, the virus will spread and it's likely already all over the United States. Our president has called the bans unscientific. He wants them urgently and immediately reversed. He also announced the government had formed a task team on mandatory vaccination for specific activities and locations.
Now, we've got this new variant, we understand that, but we don't have a hell of a lot else on it, do we?
Correct. We know it is very different from the original virus, but that's what viruses do. They mutate. For the rest, we're largely speculating. Listen out for words like reasonable chance, it appears, it is likely, all of which are being used to justify the bans on travel to and from South Africa. Needless to say, the local tourism industry is howling. Just as it looked as though there might be a chance of a decent summer season, all bets are off. Shares in local hotel groups went through the floor on the JSE on Friday. City Lodge down 15%, Soho Sun down 13%, Sun International down 10%. Soho Sun CEO Marcel van Aulock, quoted by Business Live, has appealed to government not to start panicking and putting in place restrictions when they don't know enough about the variant. Domestic travel is the only thing keeping the business alive, says van Aulock. Reimposing travel bans would destroy domestic tourism.
And that is exactly what's happened.
Yes, I'm pleased to be able to report that, at least for the time being. President Ramaphosa last night said there would be no change to our current lockdown level, at least for another week, while we assess the impact of the latest variant. It's what he believes the countries that have imposed travel bans ought to have done. Wait and see before unleashing further economic disruption. Of course, where we'll be 1 week from now remains to be seen.
The president, though, stepping into fairly uncharted territory here and insinuating to a certain extent that maybe vaccination will become compulsory.
Jeremy, we've been fighting this thing now for nearly 2 years, and it's clear, at least in this country, that what we've been doing so far has been effective, but not effective enough. Several business organizations want government to introduce mandatory vaccination. Business for South Africa wants government to restrict workplace and non-emergency public access areas to the vaccinated only. If you're not vaccinated, you won't get to go to your workplace, you won't get to go to the movies, restaurants, and so on, if they have their way. The Black Business Council also wants mandatory vaccinations rather than stricter lockdown rules, and the Restaurant Collective agrees with that. Also, for companies not to back down on enforcing workplace vaccine mandates. So if you want to work for this company, you have to be vaccinated.
Yeah, but it's going to provoke the outrage of the anti-vaxxers, who are a very vocal lobby, and they're going to come back with the human rights issues and so on and so forth.
Well, very much so, but here's the thing, Jeremy. We already have laws that limit personal freedoms in so many respects. I do not have the right to rush around on an aircraft causing havoc. Why? Because in doing so, I'm putting other people's lives at risk. I don't have the freedom to choose to drive on the wrong side of the road. Why? Because if I do that, I'm putting other people's lives at risk. But apparently I should have the right to be able to walk around spreading pestilence and disease to other people just because I feel like it. I don't go along with that. Government needs to move decisively on this one, follow Austria's lead. Austria has made it law, everyone in the country, to be vaccinated, no exceptions, starting February 1st next year.
What's the reaction to the travel bans and the new variant in the markets, Chris?
Well, on Friday, Jeremy, in a word, panic. The JSE all-share down 2.75%, the top 40 slightly less. London's FTSE down 3.6%. New York, the Dow had its worst day this year, down 2.5%. Concerns look to be easing somewhat this morning. Tokyo down around 1.5%. Hong Kong down just over 1%. Sydney down around 0.5%. Japan, by the way, has just announced it's closing its borders to all foreigners. The dollar eased to 1.13 to the euro. The rand's come back somewhat from Friday's lows when we were down to our worst levels so far this year. This morning we're around 16.18 to the dollar, 18.25 to the euro, 21.57 to sterling. Gold has also pulled back this morning as investors relax slightly, 1,793. Platinum's picked up, 979. Bitcoin took a hell of a smack on Friday, down 6%, but it's made up most of those losses over the week now, just under 57,450 this morning. And Brent crude oil down nearly 10% on Friday. That's regained about half of that. Back up this morning to around 76, just below $76 a barrel.
Okay, finally, before we move away from this topic, what news from the big pharmaceuticals?
Well, one of them, Novavax, says it has already started working on a version of its vaccine which contains Omicron's spike protein, which will be ready for testing and manufacture in the next few weeks. Novavax's shares up 9% on that announcement. Pfizer-BioNTech, one of our big ones, here in South Africa, says they're waiting for more data, which they'll have in the next 2 weeks. But they add that if the variant does evade their vaccine, they would expect to be able to ship a new one tailored to the variant within 100 days. We're also hearing similar words from Johnson & Johnson.
Okay, let's change tack. I've been surfing off the Wild Coast when I was a young wild child. I don't think I've ever caught a wave that's lasted this long. This is the Shell wave that is making huge noises along the Wild Coast on plans to explore that particular part of our continent's seabed.
Pretty big waves indeed, as you so rightly say. Now here's the deal. Shell is doing what big oil companies do, looking for oil and gas. And it's planning to do so off the Wild Coast via something called a 3D seismic survey, scheduled to start this week. A 3D seismic survey works by firing off loud sounds every 10 seconds or so and mapping what lies beneath the seabed as a result. On the face of it, pretty innocuous, you might say, except that it can have prolonged effects on marine life, large chunks of which rely on sound to find food, detect prey, evade attack, and so on. And experts say it's a direct threat to whales, dolphins, kingfish, and much more. An online petition's been started, and according to the Mail and Guardian, it already has nearly 300,000 signatures against this process.
What's the reaction been from Shell?
Well, absolutely predictable, I'm afraid. We've done thousands of these things all over the world. We're very sensitive to marine life. We follow the best international practice. We make sure there's no harm to the environment. Well, you'll be aware that the International Energy Agency has called for an end from this year for all new investment in fossil fuels, including oil and gas. Yes, says Shell, quoted by the Mail and Guardian, gas and oil are important for energy security. If there is a gas find off the Wild Coast, it will be important, playing a critical role in the just transition. You know what? In fairness, neither oil nor gas are going to go away anytime soon. And this country is horribly dependent on imports. Even so, one Eastern Cape fuel supplier, Express Petroleum, has cut all ties with Shell in protest and will drop Shell branding from its petrol stations and vehicles.
Staying with fossil fuels, I'm reading here a short article like Anglo American wanting to stay in a particular type of coal used in steel making.
Yes, this is metallurgical coal, met coal as they call it in the business, of which Anglo has a fair chunk in its portfolio, along with iron ore, also of course used in steel making. Now, Anglo recently sold off its thermal coal operations in South Africa, thermal coal used in power stations used by Eskom, as well as part of a mine also sold in Colombia to Glencore. Anglo burnishing its green credentials as it did so. But now, CEO Mark Cutifani, quoted by Mining Weekly, says Anglo wants to hang on to the met coal side of the business. He explained the decision to exit thermal coal had been prompted by concern amongst certain shareholders, but he says he's confident they won't press for an exit from met coal. Emissions from steelmaking, Jeremy, account for some 9% of the global total. Says Mining Weekly, producers are pushing to develop technologies to help them meet global climate commitments.
And finally, Jay Powell has been reappointed chair of the US Fed.
Yep, something that is often held to be the most powerful unelected job in the world. Reports from Washington indicate President Biden thought long and hard about it. He was under pressure from the Democratic Party's left wing to dump Powell and replace him with another Fed governor, Lael Brainard. She's held to be more progressive than Powell. But in the end, Biden went with the incumbent. Powell is nothing but a safe pair of hands and someone who has, by and large, done very well indeed, I think, under the extremely difficult conditions of the last 2 years. The announcement was early last week. The markets smiled. That, of course, was before this thing called Omicron.
Yeah, I think it wiped the smile off a lot of people's faces, to be honest. Chris, thank you very much for your time. We'll chat with you again next week for the final time this year on Mansfield Today. Chris Gibbons.
Thanks, Jeremy. Look forward to it.
Chris Gibbons, who comes to you courtesy of Capital Legacy, your #1 provider of wills and estate administration. That's it from Mansfield Today for today. We'll catch you tomorrow with our legal show with Advocate Lance Brogden. Until then, bye-bye.